Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have brought on a guest who is one of my favorites because he talks about something that is very close to my heart. We both want, even though our titles may sound different, we want to save souls and we want to save women's souls and we want to save men's. But today we focus on women's because a lot of it is the sexualization of women that causes the problems in society. And my guest today, Dr. Joe Malone, has been on my show before. His first book, I love talking about the battle of the sexes. And today we're here to talk about his second book, which is coming out momentarily. And it's simply called Women's Sexual Wellness. But I want you to stay tuned because we talk about some of the facts of how our bodies are working that many people don't understand. So I'm sure you're not here to watch me. You're here to see my guest, Dr. Joe Malone. Thank you for coming on board Breakfast with Bacon. It's so good to have you back.
Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate being able to be here.
I'm excited about this book. So tell us, you already told me a little bit. Tell our viewers, what is this book about? Well, how is this different than the Battle of the Sexes?
Okay, great question. This book was actually commissioned by Heartbeat International. They asked me to write it. Heartbeat International, for anybody that doesn't know who they are, they're the world's largest pro-life organization. They have 2,800, I think, different affiliates worldwide. And it's really written in the first book, Battles of the Sexes, was written for both sexes, but especially for women, because women, as we've discussed, hold the keys to sexual relationships. They're the ones
The
that they're
gatekeepers.
the gatekeepers, yes, the deciders. So it's really important that you know that they understand their God-given role in the whole thing. But Battles of the Sexes was really for both sexes at the college age. This book is written especially for even younger and pretty much primarily focused on females, even younger females than the college age, because we're having some young girls that are still coming up pregnant or thinking they're pregnant. And then again, a lot of the college age demographic women find themselves in that situation. So it really specializes in women and women's situations as far as what they're encountering, in their lives and on the college campuses and in high school campuses and that type of thing. And it's really its goal is to help be preventive to them finding themselves in that situation where they wonder if they're pregnant or not, and they're considering having an abortion. So it's really trying to be preventive, especially to abortions, but then also upstream from that to illicit sexual activity at young ages.
Yeah, and it's so sad because I know girls are having their periods way sooner than they used to. I mean, I have a family member who just had hers at 9 years old, and I'm like, wow. And so, of course, their minds and their bodies are awakened, and they're not even socially mature enough to understand all the things that come along with that. Like how
Right.
they're beautiful and how people are going to be attracted to them, and it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah.
handle.
They're physically, at maybe nearly, they're approaching maturity as a young girl like that, but they're nowhere near ready, emotionally and mentally to be able to handle any kind of sexual attraction or that
They're
type
still
of thing.
playing
And
with dolls at 9 years old.
right, exactly. And that's one of the things that I've really become aware of, Christine, and your audience, your great audience needs to be aware of too. You mentioned the front end of it that puberty is occurring, and this is especially true for girls, is occurring about 4 years earlier than it did 100 years ago. So, they're hitting puberty about 10 years old. Your was it a niece? Did you say your niece or anyway,
It,
what
it was a family member.
family member?
Yeah.
She's a little bit earlier than a lot, but 10's the average. So, and back at that time, they were hitting their puberty at about 14 and a half. So 14 and a half years old is what they were hitting, where puberty was starting 100 years ago. And then they were getting married generally at about 21. So they only had about 7 years, of time where they had, where they
Spend with the
yeah, feeling those sexual feelings, or starting to at least, and then before they got married. Now, we're at a situation where our girls are hitting it around age 10, and then they've got to go all the way to age 29, which is the average age of first marriage, for women in this country. So we've tripled basically, you know, the amount of or we've vastly increased the amount of time from like what I call puberty to marriage, the PM gap. And so that's something that I think a lot of people in society don't realize, is that we've really put our deciders, our gatekeepers, our girls in a tough situation of making the expectation that they get married so much later than it has been in the past, because it was about, again, like I said, about 21, 21 in 100 years ago, and now it's again 29. And so we've really stretched out, if I can put my hands up here, we stretched out puberty starting earlier, 4 years earlier, and basically
Marriage is going 10 years later.
right. And so you're looking at this long stretch of, nearly 2 decades of possibly having sex drive, and then trying to remain, chaste during that time period. So that's that. People talk about, different systemic problems in our society, and I'm pretty skeptical about a lot of that. But there is a, I guess you'd say, systemic problem in our society, and I call it systemic marriageism, because there's so much of this, I guess you'd say, just kind of prejudice against these young people getting married earlier. And when I
Okay,
say
told them if they get married young, Joe.
say
And I
again,
have a family member who's like, my first marriage, I was only 21 and I didn't know myself. So I got divorced, and you got to wait until you know yourself. And this particular family member always says, I'd rather my kids have sex young and wait until they're 30 or 40 to get married. And I'm like, do you even hear yourself? But it's because the sexual act is no big deal to this particular person. And our society too teaches it's okay to have it outside of marriage, but there's so many complications that come with it. And I'm going, that's backwards. And every time I get a chance to talk to this family member or her children or people around them, I say, marry young, marry young. You're never going to know yourself. I don't know who I'm going to be in 10 years, and I'm almost 60.
right.
So, that's not even what it is that sustains a marriage. It's the number one thing that holds marriage together is that belief that marriage is that divorce is not an option. That's
Right.
number one reason. So you're like, well, I can't get divorced, and people work through it. People don't think that. They think it's maturity or money or sex or anyway. So yeah, I think we should start telling people get married younger and then work and support them as they try to work through it.
I agree completely. And the research on that, again, Christine, you probably already know this, but maybe some of your audience doesn't. They've said for a long time that, and they have some research on it, that people who these days who get married before they're 30, their marriages have a less of a chance of making it, them not experiencing divorce. But what they found, and this is really important for your listeners to catch on to and really really cling to, and maybe give advice along this line, is that applies to the 75% of them that are having premarital sex, and also within that cohabiting with somebody else. They're instead of coming up to that normal 21, 22, 23 years old age that in the past they got married at, they're cohabiting with a young man, or maybe a few young men. And what they find there is that the ones that do wait until they're 30, after they've done all this cohabiting, are more successful than the ones that cohabit and then get married younger. But here's the key thing, along the lines of what you were saying. The very most effective approach to getting married and having a happy marriage and having it last, like yours and mine have, thank the good Lord. I'm on 47 now,
I'll be
47 years.
41 on Saturday.
There we go. We're in the 40s, so we're doing pretty good. But the key thing is to not have sex outside of marriage, and then not cohabit, especially don't cohabit. What they found was that the young women that got married starting at age 22, and they could go all the way up to 30, but it's mostly is near the 22 mark, and who hadn't had sex outside of marriage, and also hadn't cohabited, obviously, especially cohabiting. The ones that didn't cohabit, their marriages did the best of all. So the old school and the Catholic approach, to chastity until marriage, and then getting married probably not waiting too long, to get married. And then you and your husband, as a young woman, you and your husband growing, your lives together, because their brains, as you know, at that time are still very plastic. They're still very pliable to each other. The brain hardens up, so to speak, around age 25. So that's a very advantageous time in life to get married, and then again make your way together instead of trying to get everything in place, as you were saying, and get professions, have 2 degrees or whatever, and then go forward, because your brains are pretty 26, 27, 28, 29. You've got a pretty much hardened up single person brain. So all that said, the old school, to kind of summarize that, the old school, save yourself for your marriage and don't wait too long to get married, meaning 22, 23. You're still at a good age at 22, 23, even 24, 25 even. That works the best, as opposed to the sex with different people and then cohabitation. And so I go into some of that in this women's sexual wellness book. But a lot of the research that I'm sharing with you right now is even newer than that book is. So anyway, that's very important, and I think it's part of the reason our girls and young women are doing so badly these days is because it goes so much the lifestyle that we have, thanks to the sexual revolution, or I call it the sexual devolution with a D, sexual devolution, meaning degenerated.
Evolving, yeah.
Yeah. We've got really a lot of unhappy girls and young women. And again, you're probably familiar with in 2021, I think it was, they had, they were showing that, I've got it right here, 57% of high school girls felt persistently sad or hopeless in 2021. And that was a 60% increase. And only 29% of the boys the same age reported the same feelings. So it's definitely a girl thing, and I think it's because we've pushed them in a direction that goes against most of their
They're
sexual natures.
natural.
So
Mhm.
yeah,
Well, girls are more inclined to be modest, and there's this tearing down of the wall of just showing everything. And these days, I just walk around and I'm constantly staring at people going, what have we done? They're half naked. We have people showing every single body part. And I think they feel like they have to. And then they get comfortable with it. And then they get objectified. And then they get upset if they're raped. And then, not that they shouldn't be upset if they're raped, but we're
right.
increasing all of these factors that just, it's so sad. And so these girls are so confused, you
Yes, they
know?
are. Yes, they are. And the other thing is, this is something that's in the book that, again, it's scientific. Okay, let's just put it that way. And again, this is something that most people don't know, but let me share it with you and with your watchers here, your audience. At puberty, let's say between age 10 and 15. Okay, both sexes go through puberty, and the boys are a little bit later normally. But still around that same age that it takes place, 10 to 15. During that time period, both sexes get about 5 times as much oxytocin as they had before puberty. Now, oxytocin, you say, why is that important? Because that is the major bonding chemical for both sexes. Well, actually, especially for females, and somewhat for males. And it's especially the bonding agent between a mother and their children. So during that time period, during that 10 to 15-year-old time period, the girls and the boys both get it. And what it does to the boys is it just basically raises their sex drive, because they have so much testosterone also, building during that time period. They get up to 30 times more testosterone than they had before they hit puberty. The girls don't get, they get very little. They get like maybe 2 times as much androgens, which is all the different male hormones. And the oxytocin in their brains doesn't just increase their sex drive and make them aware of sex, but also it causes their bonding drive to shift into high gear. And so from the get-go, from puberty forward, girls have a tendency, and this is most of them, not all of them, but most of them, I'd say 80 to 90%. They have this drive not only, for sex, but also for bonding and sex within bonding. And so in the old days, you know, where sex was not, I mean, it happened obviously, but everybody had the expectation that sex was only is going to be saved for marriage, and that you might start, you know, being friendly with a boy if you were a girl, and, you know, eventually maybe as your high school years went on, you might start dating a little bit, but sex was not part of that whole
Formula.
situation.
Yeah.
But a girlfriend, and I mean a boyfriend to a girl was a typical thing, and romance was practice, and going off to the, you know, movies and dinner and all that type of thing. That worked well for the girls, because they were able to bond and then move from one bond to another. You know, they broke up with the boy, and they were able to move on to another one. Now these days, where we're having sex and, you know, we're hooking up, that type of thing, and where, as you said earlier, sex is taken so casually, and, you know, its effects on modesty, like you said. I mean, I think a lot of these girls do think that they have to advertise along with everybody else, or they're going to be left out. Anyway, what the research shows is that those stats that I just read to you, the 57%, you know, of them feeling persistently sad and hopeless, that has come about since about the mid 1970s. Girls, high school seniors, girls, happiness levels has started dropping from that point from 1976 steadily. And in about in the 90s, it actually dropped below what boys is, because historically it's been higher in those younger years, when we had the non-sexual society that we used to have, and the sexual expectations for marriage. So ever since the mid 70s, which is when the sexual revolution really hit and really, you know, started affecting everything from there forward, girls have developed more and more unhappiness. And what they found was the ones that were, you know, they did develop depression, anxiety, and all the different things that go along with this. They found out that in the research they did, that 68% of them had had some kind of a breakup right before they went into this depression situation for themselves. And it was a breakup normally that had a sexual element to it, where in the past it wouldn't have had a sexual element. The boys
So you
that
have
got
sex and breakup is more traumatic and leads to depression more so than the girls who didn't have sex and broke up.
correct, exactly. And the boys, it was 68% for the girls that got depressed, had this situation. Only 29% of the boys. And that the situation with the girls is, again, the reason that they're saying that this is the case is that oxytocin, that bonding chemical that for girls, it goes into action when sex occurs. Dopamine rate is raised and oxytocin is raised, and any kind of sexual activity, especially that sexual activity that ends in the, you know, the final, you know, orgasm, I'll just say that, um that really really bonds them. But on the other side of it, and we've talked about this before, boys and young men, they need vasopressin, they need testosterone, and they need dopamine. And the vasopressin, as we said in our previous conversation, it goes down at sex. Okay, so oxytocin goes up for the girls at sex, and vasopressin goes down for the boys at
Which
sex.
vasopressin is known as the monogamy hormone. So I always like to stress that. So this is one like, you're my woman, I want you, and you're
Yes.
saying right after we have sex, okay, it goes down a little bit. I don't want you just as much as I did before.
Right, right. And then the research amazingly shows that within 10 seconds after that happens, if it's in an unbonded situation, if they're not married, the male starts seeing her as less attractive, less funny, less smart, less all of this. On the other hand, within 10 seconds, the female starts seeing him as being
More attractive.
yeah, more attractive, smarter, all the good stuff. So that's why so many girls and young women these days end up with their hearts broken. And again, women's sexual wellness, the book's right behind me on the shelf there over my shoulder. Um, that's a lot of it's about that, of helping girls and young women, especially, understand what's going on with this whole chemistry. And again, from a young age, from puberty forward, they have these special needs as far as bonding that the boys don't necessarily need. I mean, they need them eventually, okay? But they're not looking for that necessarily, where the girls are. And so, and the other thing is oxytocin in utero. Again, sex differences start in utero. A lot of them are built in, as you know, in utero. But in utero, the girl's brain is configured to be sensitive to oxytocin, where the boy's brain isn't. And so he has both the testosterone element that's working against the oxytocin bonding, and he also has a brain that isn't configured to be sensitive to oxytocin. So altogether, the old school, I'd say from about the mid 1960s back, in our history, the way that dating and the relationships went, again, generally, there was always exceptions to this rule. It worked well for the female side of things. And really, ironically, radical feminism has really been one of the worst things for
Yeah,
females,
yeah.
in our really history. So, and it continues. It's only getting worse, as things
Everything
are.
it's teaching that a woman should have is the very thing that is killing every woman there is.
Yeah,
Well, feminism tries to say that anything boys can do, we can do, and tries to tell girls to do it. When the girls do what boys do, they're more depressed, and the boys are like, well, cool, you're easy. You're saying that you want to have sex more often. Great. That's all I wanted anyway was sex. And
yeah,
the girls didn't understand that when I was a young girl. I didn't understand that. And when people say, oh, boys are just pigs, and it's like, "Oh, you guys are wrong. Jimmy's really nice, or Joe, which boys are nice, right? But we young girls don't understand it because what you're talking about, this bonding hormones and things, it's like, I see all of his good traits. And yeah, it's just it's so easy to understand once you take what you're saying, your science, and you're laying it into reality and how we act it out, and I
right.
just think it's so important to know what you're talking about here.
Yes, I absolutely agree, and I hope that lots of people watch this, and I hope that it makes sense to them. I'll add in though that the science that we're talking about here, what's been really, really faith affirming is that the science supports the scripture. So what is taught, in Catholic catechism and just general the teachings on sexual theology of the Catholic Church, moral teachings really line up with what we're talking about here as far as what's best for humans, what leads to optimal human flourishing, basically. So, I mean, what I can do, and if there's anybody that's listening to this that are saying to themselves, "Man, I'd like this Dr. Malone to talk to our, parish or our maybe
Bring
our
him
our
in.
faculty, of our school or your Catholic school or parents, or like I talked to basically from seniors, up as far as the age group of the young people I talk to, from graduating seniors up and through college and beyond, young adults that aren't college anymore. But any of those groups, if you have people that are listening, would like me to either virtually, I can do it through this medium here, Zoom wise, or I can visit on in person because that's
I think
what
that
that's
is
what I
so
do.
valuable, Joe. I think that is so valuable. And actually, after you said it, I'm like, oh, my youth group is pretty active. And this is what the teenagers want to talk about. They want to talk about sex. They want to know their bodies. They want to talk about everything that we've mentioned, but they can't talk to their parents. Mom, tell me about a girl's orgasm. Tell me about a guy. It's not going to happen, even in the
No,
closest relationships. And so you're safe, and then you're doing it within the context of the church. Yes, I would look at everybody in the camera and say, please bring Joe in. He's very approachable. I've worked with him many times. And let your young daughters and your young sons understand someone who's not going to judge them, who's going to teach them about their basic biological urges and put it in that perspective of a deep and solid Catholic faith that he has. So, yeah, I'll promote you as best as I can. I think that's a great thing to do.
thank you, Christine. It's greatly appreciated. And not even so much for me, but I just have seen the good that it's done. Again, for the folks that are listening, I've spoken and I am speaking in a lot of especially Christian colleges, universities, and then Christian groups on university campuses. So, but I do think that those seniors in high school, because a lot of them are gonna go into the university environment, they could be helped so much by this because the messaging they'll get, when they go onto campus at their orientation, unless it's a hugely, unusual school situation, probably a very, very, very Catholic believing or, Christian otherwise. I'm thinking of maybe the Harrison Butker School, Benedictine, maybe someplace like that. They might not have a bad orientation, but most places, schools are going to give them the orientation of work, expecting you to be sexually active. You're kind of weird, as it will be the message if you don't, if you're not, and here's some condoms, and here
Here's
are
the
some.
vending machine. They have vending machines with the Plan B pill in it and condoms. Vending
Free.
machines.
Yeah, they have vending machines and it's free actually. So
Go kill your
it's
baby for free. And they do not tell them that these young ladies will be writhing in pain with dead babies falling out of their bodies, and they have to clean up these tiny little babies and all the blood. They don't say any of that. They say, oh, you'll have some cramping. It's like, no. I just can't. Anyway, Satan thinks he got it, but he's not going to win. But it's just diabolical what the college campuses do. And you mentioned getting seniors in high school. I'm actually thinking freshmen. I'm thinking the 14, 15, 16, because they need to hear it too. They need to hear it before they become
I
sexually active.
I agree. I'd be happy to talk to him. I'd be actually more than happy. I'd be overjoyed to talk to him. What I found in the past is that, especially administrators in this subject, especially with the younger than the seniors, they're real touchy and queasy about having anybody talk to them about it, because they can get so much blowback from parents that don't understand. Most sex educators that are in schools these days are trying to sexualize the students. They're trying to get them to be more sexually active, and just kind of in their view, free them from the oppressive forces of society that are keeping them from being sexually active, because their phrase is sexual from birth. They're saying that from a child, from the time you're a little child, you're sexual, and that's just crazy. That's crazy. What do you think puberty is there for? I really hate to see young kids, even though it's good for them to know some basics coming up when they're in the young ages, like the K through 5 and that type of thing. Just your basic general outlines of things. But from middle school, you're right. From middle school up, um, some of them have some huge hormonal urges going on, and some of them, as you said earlier, especially the girls early on, they get pretty mature pretty fast, and then they don't even know they can't understand the boys and the men's reactions to them. So it's
Well, and
very
I'm
difficult.
talking to these kids, Joe, I'm sorry for interrupting,
No,
that are
no, go ahead.
young. They're young. And how many, if you ask them, what percent of them has seen pictures or sent pictures, they won't all admit to sending, sexting. My grandchildren are like, oh yeah, everybody here sends pictures of their things. And so you know how it is. You're sexually aroused when you see those images, even if you didn't want to be. And so that's forcing these kids. And just the idea of how funny it is. Go send a picture of your breasts or send a picture of your privates. Um, and they don't know. So yeah, we need to help them understand visually stimulated, emotionally stimulated, what causes you to want, I mean, because you're gonna have to fight a demon if you have looked at these pictures and then you're gonna go on a date and hope to abstain from what your body is calling you to do, so
Right,
yeah.
right. And also, especially the girls, the young women. Well, first of all, the girls and young women don't generally realize that boys are so much more visual, generally sexually, than they are. For a girl and young woman, especially a young one like that, it takes a lot, to hit that situation where they're actually not a lot to get a crush on a boy or a guy, but a lot to get to that sexual arousal state that comes so easily, for males, because they have the 20 times more testosterone. And also they're males, as we said in an earlier podcast, there's one of the 3 areas of the brain that have to do with sex drive and sexual attraction, that are twice as big and twice as packed with neurons as in the male brain as in the female brain, is right here behind the optic chiasm, right there at the optic chiasm where it comes into the brain. So males are very, very visual, and that's why pornography is 6 times more effective. There's 6 times more boys that get addicted to porn than girls. Girls, on the other hand, though, are more like in the present moment of being with a boy or a young man, young woman, young man, and being around them, and their pheromones are communicating. He's got the right pheromones for her, as far as his major histocompatibility MHC system, like his immune system is enough different from hers that his smell, if they kiss, his saliva, all of that is really turning on to her. And she, especially if she was at that fertile window, that day about 8 through 14 of her menstrual cycle, she's very vulnerable to, the kind of the whole picture, helping her to get into that kind of aroused sexual state. And now you add in alcohol, and alcohol raises especially a female's testosterone levels. And she's not used to very much testosterone most of the time. And at the same time, it inhibits her prefrontal cortex, which there isn't much there anyway at those young ages, prefrontal cortex wise. So
And the
alcohol,
prefrontal cortex is what helps you make good decisions, is what you're saying. And so that's inhibited, but then your sexual arousal area of your brain is
the limbic area,
lit up.
is lit up. Yeah. And so the boys and the young men can be lit up just from viewing. And that's why being modest for a girl, young woman that doesn't really understand how boys' minds think, they don't see anything wrong with wearing a real short skirt or, low cut blouse
Or the breasts showing, and there's clothes where you can see their areolas through their shirts, or no bras, so their nipples come out. And I mean, I just look at this now and I'm just going, oh my gosh, everywhere I turn, I'm going, cover
I don't think
up, cover
I
up.
don't I don't think that they realize, Christine, though. They
I
know it
know they
gives them
don't. I know
they
they
know that
don't.
it gives them attention, and it's
Mhm.
positive attention, and from all kinds of males, probably boys their own age and probably guys older
Older
than
guys.
them.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, they like that part of it, but they just don't realize what it does in the male's brain. And again, in the male's brain, as we talked before, males, along with everything we said earlier about within 10 seconds of orgasm, she's going down in his estimation on a like a hookup on a non-marital sexual situation. But along with that, guys have a tendency to categorize women, girls and women. And if they are willing to, first of all, if they dress like that, they're going to get a certain idea about them, not the one probably the girl wants them to have. And the second thing is they're going to try things with them probably if they're dressed a certain way. I mean, given just the typical boy, not your boy that's been taught well and has deep religious, in this case Catholic, Christian beliefs. There's that they're going to act differently. They're going to go against that impulse. But in general, dressing immodestly is really, really a negative thing for a girl because she's setting a bad tone. And then she's not she's not getting the boys and young men to respect her and respect her worth because they're seeing her as not they're categorizing for a
Yeah,
good
you
time
got the
only.
girl I want to date and the girl I want to marry. So the girl I want to sleep with, but I want to marry that one.
Right, exactly. And they do that, the boys do that and the males do that because there's this thing called paternity certainty, and paternity certainty meaning that if we have in our species, we have internal fertilization and internal gestation. And so really the woman in the situation, or a girl, hopefully not a girl, but the woman in the situation is the only one that really knows who the father of the child is. And so if, if the girl is acting, if she's acting, promiscuous looking, and then, she's looking that way, first of all. And then secondly, if she's acting that way, then the male is not going to want to stick around for the marriage with somebody like that. They're going to want to just have a good time, and more than likely they're going to move on because of the bonding, as we described earlier. The vasopressin bonding is never going to take place. The successful pathway for these girls and young women, they need to realize, and this is probably the biggest lesson I can teach, is that the pathway to success in a male female relationship that hopefully has the potential to be a marriage relationship is for her to do the old school women's again, chastity,
Say no
women's
and make them want me.
right, because again, that's going to make that vasopressin stay in his brain while he's around her, and just he's infatuated, and again, he's not getting the ultimate the sex that he may be wanting. But on the other hand, he doesn't really want it because he doesn't really want her to give in, because he wants to see that she has the guts and the discipline to not do that. And then that's going to reassure him that down the road, she's not going to, step out on him. And between now and then, between now and them getting married, she's not going to be promiscuous. And so, and same thing with him. She wants, although it's not as a big of a deal because you know, every woman knows who, they have sex with. So that isn't a situation where there's a mystery about it. But they want a man that will stick around, while they're pregnant, and be a good husband, be a good provider, work with her, work with her when the children are born, and just make it a team, a team situation. Be a provider and a protector, and a male doesn't display that by uh having promiscuous sexual relationships with women. So ultimately, it kind of comes down to trust. We humans we're born into a situation where we're dependent on a trust relationship. If our mom and our dad, because we need both really working on this, if they don't take care of us as humans, we're so prematurely born because our brains are so big, they can't come out the birth canal without being as premature as they are. They grow to 3 times the size they are when they're born, within about the first 5 years. So we are totally dependent, as opposed to most other creatures that are born. Most other creatures, if you think about it, a horse can run very quickly after they're born. All these different creatures that are born can pretty much, defend themselves or run or take care of themselves. Our babies are totally dependent on us. So
For years,
we have that.
yeah.
You have that requirement of a dependence on a trust relationship, and that's based on oxytocin mostly, oxytocin and vasopressin, from the father. And that's how we come into this world. And then as we mature through the baby and toddler and child years, and then up into puberty and through puberty, we're looking for that again. That's the human instinct in most cases, is to look for a trust relationship that we can build with this person of the opposite sex. And then we repeat the process of okay, here's our child, and now they're dependent upon us. We have this bond between the two of us. We have this love, this where we would put the other person first. I mean, the assassination attempt, I think, really, a week or two ago, whatever it's been, of President Trump. Where the firefighter Corey threw his body over his wife and daughter's bodies and shielded them, and he got killed from doing that. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate thing of what people are looking for. And again, you don't find that in a hookup, situation. You don't find that in casual sex. You find it
Yeah, it's to each his own in hookups. I got mine, you get yours.
right. And really, when you said what you said earlier about when you mentioned it, um, really, chemically, biochemically, and hormonally, hooking up or watching porn, and probably a couple other situations, friends with benefits, is really like a drug addiction. It really hits the brain the same way, because it basically gives a person a high, and then boom, it drops right back down. Falling in love with somebody and getting married to them, committing yourself to them, is not a drug addiction. It's a biochemical benefit that just keeps on building and building and building. We all know that drug addictions, I guess, and substance addictions, and then also behavioral addictions, which is what hooking up and porn would be. They all lead to a bad place, because they end up, again, your dopamine's involved in all addictions. So it's supposed to, if I can get this right with my camera here, it's supposed to go like this, and then come up a hill, and then come back down gently to another level, and then to a hill again. But when we do things like hook up or watch porn, it goes sharply up, and then it crashes back down. And every time it crashes back down, it goes to a lower level than it was before baseline. And so when you do it again in a
You
near in
need more
time,
of it. Yeah, you need
yeah,
more
and
of it to have the same high.
because you get desensitized to it. Yes. So we were not meant to have these casual sex relationships and hookup relationships and porn. Again, and porn hits the brain the same way, and so it's destructive to us. That's why I use the term sexual devolution instead of sexual revolution. It really, it hasn't. I can't think of much positive at all, from the sexual revolution. And
I don't
it's
think
you.
there is anything positive from it, except that we've learned to, we have solid proof that men and women are in fact different. We've seen
Yes.
it.
And one tiny thing that might be more positive is that I think the ability to discuss it, as you said earlier, the ability to be educated about
Yeah,
it,
there's
I
an
think is
openness about
extremely
it.
important and beneficial. It's just that again, the education should not go in the direction of trying to sexualize them more. It should be go in the direction of trying to get them to be able to control and have self mastery. I would call it sexual integrity education. That's what we need to have is sexual integrity education.
And that's
So
really
that
what you are. You're a doctor of women's sexual integrity. I mean, that's what you've spent your career, you've studied that, and that's
Mhm.
it's just huge and it's necessary. I want to kind of cut in because
Sure.
you were commissioned to write this book by Heartbeat International, pro-life agency. So obviously their goal is to save lives, right? How
Right.
have you found, or what have you written in the book that specifically do you think points to that issue, saying don't get pregnant because, or don't have sex because, or is it just explaining all of this? Everyone
Well,
knows, don't abort a baby, but what did
it's
you offer that helped
it's a
them?
combination of things. I've got the manuscript right here, and again, the book hasn't actually even come out, but that's the prototype back there behind me.
It'll be
Let
out
me
in a
just
couple
read.
days. Yeah,
Yeah,
just so
a
people
couple
know they can
days. Yeah,
pre-order.
yeah. Pre-order is available, and yeah, it should be out soon. Let me just read you some of the topics in the like chapter headings, and then
That's
that
what I
maybe we
wanted.
can
Yes.
answer the questions. And by the way, I apologize I couldn't send you a copy. Normally I can,
I'll
but
hold
it
it
just hasn't
against you, but it's okay.
been. Okay. The first chapter is the way we were, and what I get at there is that people despair, I think, these days because they think it's been better in the past and it's just gotten worse and worse as far as sexual anarchy has grown, from being sexual integrity in the past to sexual anarchy now. And actually it's cycled. It's cycled a couple times in the last 350 years. So we're on about number three cycle. We're on the pendulum swinging back towards sexual integrity. So that's the good news. Next title is Human Sex Differences, the Biological Reality. So we talk a lot about the things you and I have talked about in the last couple sessions, plus this one, the biological reality. There's so many people out there that are teaching things that are not even true, about the gender ideology. You can have 73 genders, and you can choose to be a male or a female depending on how you feel that day, etc. It just is not true. There's a biological reality, and the differences are sharp, as you said earlier. um, Spin cycles. I mean, we talked about this earlier. The profound effects of women's menstrual cycles, and so there's a chapter on what's going on in these girls and the young women as they go through puberty and they start having these cycles, and particularly at certain times of the cycle, how they might be more vulnerable to being sexually reckless than at others. There's a chapter on the pill. It's called She's Quite the Pill. And again, there's bad news all around on the pill situation. And it's going to end up, I think, being really bad as time goes on, as far as people realizing the damage it's done. Not only with promiscuity and that type of thing, but just the flat out damage to girls and women in the chemical effects of it. Next chapter is entitled The Humiliation of Hookup Culture. And again, if you can't tell from this conversation today and from the earlier conversations, hookup culture is really makes losers, especially out of women. Both males and females lose because, for one thing, I mean, getting married and having a happy, healthy marriage relationship adds 10 years of life expectancy to a man's life. It adds about 2 years to a woman's life. So going down the God's pathway, God's design is really beneficial, and especially to the males. All right, so that there's that, and then the pain of pornography. No, I'm sorry, the Tinder trap, and what I mean by that, the Tinder, as in the dating app, how dating
Yes.
apps are very destructive. Boy, I mean, I'm glad I'm not,
Me
dating.
too. Yeah.
This would be a real nightmare. Um, and it just, it makes it commodifies so much everybody involved. Your picture, you know, and again, most of the time they don't look like their picture from what my young people that I study. It's this huge disappointment because it's not what they actually look like, or you know, it's not really. They tell a lot of lies in that. And then again, it's just like swiping left, swiping right. You know, the ones that aren't very attractive, they're just totally blown off. You know, uh, it looks like
Yeah, you're
that
not getting past the visuals to even see what are some of the criteria, what are some of the things about the personality that you might
exactly.
like.
So the most important things they're leaving out, and the most superficial things they're making the important thing. One thing out on that note, let me just say this, that it turns in it both men and women have testosterone, even though women have a small amount of it. But there are times that testosterone with some women, again, especially like if they've been drinking alcohol, they will go along the testosterone route where, you know, they're just interested in sex. And again, that's very rare for a woman, but they end up in when they're in that kind of situation where they're hooking up, they end up with shallow, superficial, and short relationships. That's what it ends up being: shallow, superficial, and short. Now, if they hold out, if they're disciplined and they create the oxytocin relationship, they find that they get deep, intimate, and long relationships. So that's what the most women that I've dealt with, young women, they want deep, they want intimate, and they want long relationships, long as in lifetime, if possible, as opposed to, you know, a week and then he's
Yeah.
on to somebody else. So, all right, just wanted to mention that. The pain of pornography. Now, again, we talked about pornography, but from a biochemical point of view, I explain it from a biochemical point of view. There's a couple things, a couple chemicals, delta phos B and CREB, which is an acronym I won't go into right now, but they're actually the things that actually change the brain. Now, especially of males, they change the brain to where they are very, very dependent on it. And they can't, as you said earlier, they can't get enough because they get habituated to it, and they get tolerance to it, and so they have to have. Turns out they have to have
Enormous.
more and more extreme and more graphic, more and more perverse, I guess would be a way to
And the
put it.
high is shorter and shorter. It's like any addiction.
Right, and it's people don't realize it though, for the most part, that porn is one of the worst because it addicts more of them, a higher percentage of them than would be addicted otherwise, because we have this instinct for sex in us. We have an instinct for food, of eating. So eating disorders, overeating, people being obese, and especially, you know, like the United States is like way above what it should be naturally. But we have this satiation overcoming mechanism in us when it comes to food. We also seem to have it when it comes to sex. So it has a tendency to be more addictive to more people on a population basis than like heroin or alcohol
Gambling.
or your typical thing. So that's another thing. And also with high speed internet porn, really the big thing for males especially is novelty. You know, if they keep saying seeing novel sexual situations, it keeps popping their dopamine up. But as you said earlier, you know, most things, if they had the same situation, same sexual situation over and over again, the dopamine drops because there's nothing novel to it. But with high speed internet porn, especially like in high definition, like they have it now, they just can keep seeing all these different things. And again, it usually goes more in a more and more perverse, extreme, violent direction. So not a good situation. And also they're getting it so young, you know, I think the average first exposure is 11 years old. And that's
Thought it was
imprinting.
younger than that. I thought it was 7 or 9 now.
Well, it may be that's probably 3 or 4 years old, so it may be happening even earlier. It's hard to keep it away from them because
Horrifying.
screens are ubiquitous. Um,
I
uh,
remember when my grandsons used to play with their cousins on the video game, right? And there was one game they liked to play called Assassin's Creed. And so you have to type it in to pull it up, and they type in ASS, and then stuff would pop up. And my grandson was like, he instantly knew it wasn't good, but they got exposed. And then, of course, uh, he told me later about some things that he had seen, and he was so innocent about. And so I didn't get mad, of course. It was like, angry at the organizations that do that. Um, anyway, 7 years old. And then I heard that the average age was now around 7 or 9 years old, which just makes me just hate Satan so much more for what he's trying to do. But that's just me.
It's got getting younger and younger. Yeah. And it's all satanic, it's
They
all
want their
satanic.
minds. Yeah.
Yeah. The stigma of STIs, again, promiscuity and cohabiting is a huge part of that. And women are more vulnerable. I won't go into the details, but just on the
Well, we already
anatomically.
talked about that. Women are the recipients, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
they
And they
receive
have
all the chemicals and they receive all the semen and they receive all the liquids and
right.
Mhm.
And there's an environment there that's primed
Yeah,
for
right,
bacterial
right,
growth. Whereas on the male side of it, there isn't an environment there,
right.
that's primed for bacterial
I
and
mean, it just
viral.
hurts the women in all the ways.
Yeah, I mean, especially the ones that don't, it's very common for them not to realize that they have a STI and for it to go for years because it's asymptomatic. And then, it's creating crust on their fallopian tubes. And many of them end up not being able to have children just because of that. They're made infertile just from what they did in high school or college. And that's heartbreaking, let alone some of them are actually die from it, or the book Battles of the Sexes, my co-author was one of my former students that I had there at the college, and she's given me permission to share this. She was in a sorority, she was sexually active, and she picked up HPV, and she didn't know it. It was asymptomatic. She ended up with type, what is it, stage 1 cancer, cervical cancer. So at 28 or 29, she had to have a hysterectomy where she had everything taken out except for ovaries. And fortunately, her husband and her had already had
Wow.
their children, but that's tragic, and it's life threatening. So, just so many things that can be done there to prevent problems. And mostly just not doing it, not having sex until you're married and making sure that you're marrying somebody that hasn't had done the same thing. And then you don't have anything to worry about. Marriage MIA. And there's so many good things about marriage, and it's gone down so much, starting in the 1970s. It went down by, I think it was 75% in the 1970s, and divorce it doubled in the 1970s. So, and age of marriage started going up in the
Yeah.
1970s, but also the 80s. So, what we talked about earlier about younger marriage, that's where we started working our way up to age 29, which is what it is now. That's where it happened. I've got a ton of examples of how marriage is beneficial that I won't go
Yeah, but
into.
I think for the sake of this podcast, I think you've given enough great information, and I think people need to get their hands on this book. And I
Yeah.
actually, as much as I love your books, I think parents should consider giving this to their children at an appropriate age. Middle school, I think, would be a good time and read it, or maybe sometimes I've talked to people about audio taping themselves because it's very embarrassing. As open as I am, I still didn't talk to my mom about anything because it was just private, right? So I found if you're not looking a child in the eye, so if you audio tape yourself reading the book or reading the book and then giving the
Hmm.
child that recording to listen to and then say, here, if you have any questions, that is what I'd love to see parents do is get their hands on this book, find the part that they think is most appropriate for their children, and then just start sending to them because the kids will be like, they'll act like mom, but they will be in their bedrooms listening to it because this is exactly what intrigues them, what they want to know. Teachers, but of course, teachers don't have the freedom to talk about, but at least that the teachers know this information and students say something and it can come up in a classroom discussion like it did when I was teaching at the university. Well, if you
Right.
have the information, knowledge is power. And
Right.
then, maybe even create it as a textbook, even though it's not written as a textbook, it would be,
Yeah.
great extra reading for them. So,
Uh,
yeah,
it,
I'm sure that there's a lot more that you want to tell us about the book, but where can people get it from?
they only can get this one. They can get the Battles of the Sexes through Amazon, all the regular places. But this one, Women's Sexual Wellness, is only available through Heartbeat International. And I think I'm going to send the link for that to you. So if you're
Yep,
able to
it's
and
right
want
here
to,
below, so I
okay.
got it
And
posted
also
below.
I'll send the ad as well for it so they can kind of get a little blurb on what they're saying about it. But Heartbeat International is basically only being sold through them. They're a great organization, and this book, along with what you just said, and that's a great idea. It's the first time I thought about a parent, reading it and recording it. Um, and that parent child thing, discussing this, I know exactly what you're saying because it was the same way with us, my wife and I, and our kids. Um, but yeah, they'll have to order it through them, and it has another feature to it that they might like is it has Bible verses that apply to that situation, in the
Ah,
text. So
nice.
interspersed in all the text there, there's Bible verses that show that, in God's plan, he anticipated all these things and he's got the direction for it. And so they can throw that into their children as well.
I think it would be great, absolutely not a joke, taking it into Bible study. It is part of God's plan for us. And everyone wants to talk just about the spiritual, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek. No, let's talk about Bible study in terms of your body and sex. And let's get us back on track. I would absolutely, and that's perfect. Study
Well,
that Bible verse and have the kids talk about it.
that's an awesome idea because
I know these
I
ideas are
think,
coming to me, Joe.
yeah, I need to get you in charge of my media
Well,
and
your
my
work is
PR.
so good, Joe. The work you're
Well,
doing is
and
amazing. God
vice
is really using you.
and vice versa. That's a great idea, and I can see like even a women's Bible study, where they go through it and the Bible verses are there, but then there's all these scientific facts that are helpful to them, would be helpful to them if they are counseling with younger women. The Bible talks about older women counseling with younger women in Titus, I think it is. Yeah, that's actually a great idea because it's
I think
very
you and I
interesting.
like a little video series. We'll talk about that after we go off camera, but I think we need to get these out there and get them in the hands. Little, what did they used to have those little Bible tracts that they'd pass out in paper? I think these just kind of need to get out because it's exciting stuff. The kids like it. It's never going to bore them to talk about sex or their bodies. And so you put it in God's terms and you let them have a space that says, free to talk about this. Here we're going to talk about everything from, your periods to orgasms to childbirth to bonding and marriage and all the things that excite you, dating, they're in. You'll fill a class. That's what they want to hear.
Yeah, I agree, and you've inspired me during this session because I hadn't been thinking along those lines, but I think you're exactly right. It's made for that kind of a situation because it is a subject matter that they're quietly and kind of shyly needing and wanting to know. So,
Yeah.
having a great way for them to access it would really be a wonderful addition to their lives, I think.
Yeah, because so many kids don't read, and those are the ones that need to get the book. But we could talk about this forever. I love your work. Name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something we talked about today.
Well, especially for the girls, the daughters and that type of thing, nieces and that type of thing. I would encourage the older women, literally, if either get this book, this Women's Sexual Wellness, it's right there behind me, or another one like it, and really share it with your young women and girls in your life because they truly are being really just assaulted, by the culture and by the society. And ones I've dealt with, they don't know what to do, and they like you said, that maybe the ones I've dealt with was at the college level, and it's like I can't go talk to my parents about this, and my sorority sisters don't they all seem to be doing it, and they seem to
They're
be
all
okay
sleeping
with it.
around. Yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
weirdo.
so as a parent or an aunt or that type of thing, woman to woman, I think it'd really be a great thing to kind of take them under your wing and just share this knowledge, but also maybe share some of the things you've learned, coming up through the years. And most women, girls and women have learned the hard way, that being promiscuous with guys, it really
First.
leads to, yeah, it leads to a bad place. And the other thing I would say along that line is that people, since we all came through well, most of us, many of us, our age, and then most people have come through the sexual revolution, and we've done, stupid things in our past, but there's some people that will say, I don't want to talk to my kids about this because I don't want to feel like a hypocrite because I didn't do everything just perfectly,
Right.
So don't feel that way. I mean, they're your children or your nieces and that type of thing. And again, they're vulnerable. These girls are vulnerable. So share with them. I mean, if it comes down to, you showing your humanity, your things that you've done that you would like to have to be able to do over again, that maybe some of the things you regret, don't stand by and let your kids and your nieces be harmed by
Grandchildren. Yeah.
grandchildren. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I would encourage them is don't take yourself out of the game because you haven't had a perfect record yourself. Almost nobody has. I mean, that's what it's all about. Christianity is all about not having a perfect record, but getting it right and then going forward and
Right.
saving these young people, especially these young girls and young women, saving them all the heartache and all the bad
What we
stuff that
had to
can
go
happen
through.
to them. Yeah. That's what I would say.
Ah, Dr. Joe Malone, you're awesome. I want everyone to get your hands on the book. It's Women's Sexual Wellness, and you can get it from Heartbeat International. There's a link below for you to click on it. But the book you see in the background there, Battle of the Sexes. He's been on my show. We talked about that. I'll put a link to that podcast also in the show notes so you can watch that show as well. That one was one of those, don't let little ears listen to it because we went kind of deep in talking about stuff. So, and Joe, can they find you or does it just get you through the books? Do you have any kind of public persona or contact that if people are interested that they could
Yes,
get you
ma'am.
or what is that?
They can get in touch with me. Thank you. They can get in touch with me on drjoemalone.com. So it's just drjoemalone.com. And then
Is that
also,
DR period or DR JOE?
yeah, just DR and then JOE and then MALONE.com. And then just same as you're looking at the bottom of my screen here, Dr. Joe Malone without the period
Punctuation,
after the R.
right?
And so, and then the other thing is on Facebook and Instagram, Romance Revolt is the name of our program that we've got going there. And please, if you have either young men, young women, boys, girls that are coming up in and through this time period, we're trying to promote on Romance Revolt. So it's just Romance Revolt, Facebook and Instagram. We're trying to promote these values that we're talking about and encourage them to go down these pathways of premarital chastity, building strong marriages, building strong families, and show them that they're not alone, in all of this. So Romance Revolt, Facebook or Instagram. So again, almost most people seem to be on one or the
On
other of those.
those, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you can always, if you forget all that because you're listening to this as you're driving in your car, go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. It'll attach to this podcast and everything we've just talked about. You can just click on the show notes and get access to that. But definitely do it. And we have to be proactive in saving our children, saving our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews. We can't just trust the world when we know we absolutely can't trust the world. So we have to be intervening. It's work, it's hires, it's exhausting. But, when you answer to God and he says, you intervene for that young lady or that young man, as much as I know you were busy, and God's going to reward you for that. And that's what we need to do. We're Catholic first, and then we are everything else, mothers, daughters, sisters, brothers, sons, workers, and things like that. So, did you have any last things you wanted to say before I took us off?
Just thank you very much. I so appreciate you and your audience. And again, I would encourage them to follow through on the things I've said. If you want to contact me, again, Joe Malone at phd@gmail.com. I'll give you my email address, Joe Malone, phd@gmail.com. And just don't hesitate to contact me. I'd be glad to help any of your listeners out there in any way that I can.
All right, and if he starts any of these courses, and please bring him in as a speaker to your church, your youth group, your whatever. But he's got some good stuff. But I do think we need to take it off the air. We're running over our time because the conversations are always so good. So go follow me on breakfastwithbacon.com. Like and subscribe to me here on this social media channel, Rumble, Instagram, Twitter, which I'm supposed to now say X, and I think Facebook. I'd love to see you. join me, and please share with your friends, because the guests that God's giving me are people who we need to get them out. And so if I'd be very honored if you'd share this show with your friends and family. So, oh, and then don't forget, I am organizing a conference in Virginia Beach this October 12th, the Truth Speakers, Disrupting the Culture with Truth, third annual conference. We're having Christine Watkins, Daniel O'Connor, Mark Mallet, myself, and also Reagan Long will be doing the emceeing, and it's going to be fantastic. And so go truthspeakers.org to get your tickets. But okay, that's enough. I think I've been talking, and Joe's been dying to say what he knows he needs to say. So I am Dr. Christine Bacon. You've been watching Breakfast with Bacon, and I'd like to remind you always to live your life
Sunny side up.
He's got it.
Thanks.
You're welcome.